Here we are. John Bercow's book, Unspeakable, the autobiography, is out now. And it needs to be said first and foremost that you're in the news again today for reasons that presumably you'd rather not. These bullying allegations are not going away, and they could yet see you being, I think, the first speaker in history not to take up a seat in the House of Lords.
Well, obviously, the allegations are unwelcome as far as I'm concerned, and you say they're not going away, James, but the key point about them is that I utterly and unreservedly refute them. As I said yesterday in an interview with Dermot Murnaghan on Sky,
yes,
as far as I'm concerned, those allegations are total and utter rubbish. There is no merit or substance in them whatsoever, and one of the people who keeps taking to the airwaves to criticise me has frankly not the slightest idea what he's talking about. He is in no position to make any such allegations. He didn't work for me. He wasn't an employee of the House of Commons.
You're referring
I had
to
a
the
couple of arguments with him. Yes, I had an argument with him in 2011, May 2011, and an argument with him in June 2012, which were never mentioned again by either of us. And for the remaining years until he retired in 2018, that he continued to serve in the House of Lords, we got on adequately. He has no knowledge of my relations with House of Commons staff or members of Parliament. What I can say, for the benefit of your listeners,
yes,
is that I had a huge number, an overwhelming majority of highly successful and fruitful working relationships with staff, and I was re-elected as Speaker, having been elected first in 2009, no fewer than 3 times, making me the first Speaker in the post-war period to be elected a total of 4 times. David Leakey, and others for that matter, are perfectly entitled to their views of my speakership. What they cannot credibly do is accuse me of bullying, of which they have not a scrap of evidence. I disagreed with them. I argued my corner. I came up now and again against quite entitled people used to issuing instructions and having their say and having their way, and they didn't like it when a reforming speaker stood up to them. Well, I'm afraid they'll have to lump it.
And why then would anybody formerly in your orbit, and perhaps closer to your orbit than the former Black Rod ever was, be required or desire to sign non-disclosure agreements after leaving their jobs?
Well, the signing of a non-disclosure agreement, James, was absolutely nothing whatsoever to do with me. I didn't know about it at the time. I wasn't asked to authorise it. That was a staff decision made by the most senior staff in the House, and an individual who left me in the summer of 2010, someone I didn't appoint but I inherited and worked with for a year, then left, apparently signed such a non-disclosure agreement. I repeat, it wasn't stipulated by me. I wasn't aware of it. To this day, I've not seen it. I've no idea what's in it. What I do know is that in relation to the individual concerned, we tried to make the working relationship succeed. It didn't. I explain in the book why it didn't work.
You do, yes.
Issue after issue after issue after issue. I was wanting to reform. That person wanted to keep the status quo. And when the relationship ended, he held out his hand to shake hands and said, "I quite understand, Mr. Speaker, you must have working for you a secretary whom you want." And at the time, he went with good grace. It is frankly preposterous that several years later, it should be suggested that in fact he was bullied. He wasn't bullied. I have several witnesses who will testify that he wasn't bullied. He was fairly treated. It was a working relationship, and there can be some in this category that didn't work. That doesn't mean that either party was in any sense guilty of misconduct. It means simply that it didn't work.
Do you think you're going to end up in the Lords?
I don't know.
What do you think?
That's not a matter for me.
No, I know it isn't, but if you had a few quid to put on it one way
I'm not going to get into
one
the
way or
business
the
of
other.
betting.
I'm genuinely interested in how you think this is going to unfold.
Yeah, you may be interested, but I'm not a seer. I mean, it's very good of you to credit me with the quality of a psychic, but I'm not a psychic.
I'm just
James,
asking for an opinion, not for a prediction necessarily.
I don't
but
know.
I understand
it's
that you
not.
might not want
I
to
should
do
say
that.
to you, James, that it's not a matter of entitlement. It is a very long-standing convention, and I was given by ministers to understand that it would happen in my case, including by very senior ministers, but it's not a matter of entitlement, and I wouldn't claim that it is. In this instance, it's very obvious that there is an orchestrated attempt by a number of people to throw a spanner in the works, to throw as much mud at me as they think they can possibly do, and hope that that will provide the basis for turning me down. I wouldn't do anything differently. To err is human, and I made mistakes, but I fought constantly to pursue and implement the reforming mission for which I secured a mandate when I stood and restood for election as Speaker.
I should make it clear you're sticking around. We're going to do a much longer interview for my Full Disclosure podcast series after this. And by way of preparation for that, there's 4 words that fascinate me about your pre-Speaker career. 2 of them are tennis coach and the other 2 are Monday Club. I mean, you were actually, I've seen you at Wimbledon, and you're like a boy in a sweet shop, aren't you? I've seen you in the sort of VIP bits and everyone else is queuing up for the chicken. You can't wait to get into the seats to watch the tennis. I didn't realise you'd been an actual tennis coach.
Yes, I was a tennis coach in my youth, James. I love tennis.
I mean, you really do. I'm not exaggerating.
About tennis.
Well, I'm not on your own as well. You weren't enjoying any of the hospitality.
No, I sometimes go with friends and guests and so on, but you're absolutely right that I sometimes go on my own. I am potty about it. I am fixated on it. I am swivel-eyed about tennis, and in particular, I am obsessed with Switzerland's greatest export. Switzerland's greatest export is not chocolate or financial services or watches. Switzerland's greatest export
we'll talk a little bit more about that later. And
I'm very happy to respond to the question about the Monday.
Well, I should add that for people in my age, when I was in the sixth form at school, it was...
Was this when you were in the sixth form at your public school,
At my public school, yes. The understanding was that the Monday Club was essentially a sort of posh version of the BMP, which is probably a little unfair.
I think that's slightly exaggerated, but fundamentally it is, or was, I'm not sure if it still exists, a racist fringe group on the edge of the Conservative Party. It's not formally linked to the Conservative Party, but most of its members, I think, were members of the Conservative Party. And I've always been, over the decades, unequivocal about this. I was totally wrong to join. I was giving succour to people who held racist views. I was and have remained completely ashamed of that period in my life. The only thing I can say to your listeners, and in a sense on a human level to you, James, is this. If you believe in the Rehabilitation of Offenders Act, given that I formally resigned from the Monday Club in February 1984, 36 years ago, and have since been a champion of equality across the piece, I would hope that I'm forgiven.
Well, indeed, and of course...
But was I stupid, mad... Absolutely
misguided,
but misguided. To be a despicable thing to do.
A bit facetious. One sees some of your most vociferous critics, you could almost offer this up as a line of defence. You could say, I'm not that bad. I used to be in the Monday Club. Why do you hate me so much?
I certainly wouldn't offer up any such defence at all. You're trying to tease me there.
No, I'm not really. I'm trying to tease your critics, of whom there are many.
Line.
So when did it move? When did you feel the focus move from being, I think, a popular speaker? Certainly people enjoyed your flourishes, your clear enthusiasm for the job, your relish for parliamentary procedure and process and tradition and pageantry. And then, obviously, I would say obviously Brexit related, you began to vie for public enemy number one in some corners of the media and, of course, the Commons. When did you feel the wind changing?
That there was quite the change that you describe. I think the truth of the matter is that I was never very popular with most members on the Conservative benches. I think there were periods when it was relatively calm. I had been re-elected as Speaker. There was no great dispute at the time, and therefore, slightly reluctantly, and with an air of resignation, Conservative members accepted my continuing speakership.
Were you always unpopular with them? I mean, when they were your colleagues, they were your friends, weren't they? I mean, you weren't a
I think I was unpopular.
Tory.
Well, I think probably I was unpopular with some at all times, partly because I'm a rather an opinionated character. I've got a strong personality. I am rather a Marmite figure who tends both to inspire and to divide. So I think there was probably always an element of unpopularity. But in answer to your question, when did I become really unpopular on the Tory benches? I think when I ceased to be a right-winger.
Okay.
I think the truth of the matter is that most people in a political party tend to remain roughly in the same position over a period of years. This is a huge generalisation, but I think it's broadly true. And I think for those who had seen me as a right-winger and liked me as a right-winger. They were appalled when I ceased to be a right-winger and moved very much more out of conviction and changed political circumstances and the lessons of defeat to the centre. I think they cavilled at that. They were upset by it. They felt that it was a betrayal. And I think for people who were more mainstream in the middle of the Tory party, it's my personality that I'm all or nothing. And at the point at which I became a reformed character, a moderniser, a believer in a much more centrist approach, I think some of them felt that I was ramming it down their throats. I remember one Conservative Member of Parliament who said to me without malice, "John, you used to be well to the right of me, and now you're almost to the left of me, and I find it more than a little irritating that you press this modernising cause with such zeal. You know, you're very much a Johnny-come-lately to moderation."
How interesting.
And he didn't like the fact that I was sort of stuffing it down his throat.
You'd be getting negativity from the people you'd abandoned and the people that you'd joined. But we're out of time for the purposes of this exchange. Unspeakable, the autobiography by John Bercow, is out now. It's a weighty tome. We shall explore more of its contents in the podcast that we are about to record. So, John Bercow, for now, thank you very much indeed.
Thank you very much.